Hey booktube, Chelsea the Reading Outlaw here to finally do a booktube SFF Babbles. I know I have been a complete slacker when it comes to participating in the Babbles this year. It's just those first couple months of the years were really rough. You don't need to hear any more about it from me because I've already told you guys about it before. So I couldn't miss this topic though. This week's topic is short fiction in SFF. Favorite, best, well-loved short fiction in SFFs. And I have so many things. I knew I did a lot of digital short reading, but I didn't realize until I was going through my shelves that I actually do a lot of, I have a lot of physical short collections, and I kind of didn't even realize it. I didn't even pull, I mean, this is definitely not all of them, but I didn't even pull all of my SFF ones, just some of the ones that I love the most and have reread several times. So I will go ahead and talk about the digital stuff first, and then I'll talk about the physical stuff that I have, some of which you already saw in the thumbnail. I think probably, like most people, or most people in the SFF community who read short fiction, Uncanny Magazine probably takes my #1 spot when it comes to like sourcing out my short fiction. Uncanny is where one of my favorite short stories of the last couple years has been published. Their Talons Can Crush Galaxies by Bo Bolander. I fucking am obsessed with this story. I want to get the whole thing tattooed on my body. I talk about it all the time whenever short fiction in SFF comes up. I absolutely just adore it. It's about feminism and actual harpies and assault and recovery and rage, and it's so good and I love it so much. But really, Uncanny Magazine is just an unbelievable place to start. They have something for everyone. Every 2 months they come out with a new issue. They have beautiful cover art. They do a wide selection of fiction shorts. They do at least one reprint, and then they always have poetry and essays as well as interviews. If you can't afford right now or choose not to get the print, like digital edition to read the story, you can always subscribe to their podcast and listen to a couple of select stories from every issue every month. They usually do like 2 stories, 2 poems, and 2 interviews split up into 2 different podcasts. So I just really, really love it. Like I said, there's usually something for everybody. I never regret reading the whole thing like straight through. It's one of those ones that I do just read like straight through beginning to end, and I always find something to love. There are other short stories like magazines and sources that I'm subscribed to online, things like Clark's World and Nightmare Magazine and digital sources like Escape Pod. So there are lots and lots of digital, and I'll link all of those and a couple more that are of course like fleeing my head right now down below. I think that digital is the way to start if you are looking to get into short reading. I think sometimes collections can be so hit or miss, or can be so unbalanced in tone or in the way that they're put together, because that can be so tricky, that finding digital sources that are curated by people that you trust and voices that you like will do more than anything, in my experience, to up the amount of short fiction that you're able to read. That's why I'm so obsessed with Uncanny, because I think Lynn, Michael, Mitchie, and their whole team, just their taste and my taste like vibes. So much of what they pick out I just end up absolutely loving. But like I said, there are lots and lots of sources. So if Uncanny doesn't do it for you, or if you want more than one that will do it for you, there are lots and lots of different places to check out. I mentioned Nightmare Magazine. That's part of like the Lightspeed family. Those magazines are really great because every year they do a special issue. They've done Queers Destroy Horror, Science Fiction, and Fantasy. People of Color Destroy Science Fiction, Horror, and Fantasy, and Women Destroy Science Fiction, Horror, and Fantasy. Of course, those are 3 different magazines covering each kind of genre. But even if you don't get subscriptions, I highly recommend looking down below and finding those special issues, because those are my go-to places when I'm looking for new like authors within those different genres and like classings to find. So like if I need a new person of color horror author, I will go back to that issue of like Nightmare Magazine, that special issue of Nightmare Magazine, and look through the contents and the people that those people talk about and the stories that they met. And so like I've done that several times to kind of look for new authors, and it's proved really successful. So that's kind of like the digital side of what I do. To talk about some of the collections I have, these are much more specific. I have 3 author specific collections, and then one that's more of like a general collection that's arranged by theme. The first one, the Mac Daddy, one of my favorite short SFF authors of all time. One of my favorite SFF authors of all time is Ray Bradbury. This is the Barnes & Noble like cloth bound leather beautiful bind up that I think they still do. I don't know. I haven't been in a Barnes & Noble in forever, and I don't know how much longer they're going to be around to go into. But this is my Ray Bradbury bind up of The Martian Chronicles, The Illustrated Man, and The Golden Apples of the Sun. I like Golden Apples of the Sun. The Illustrated Man is one of my favorite short story collections of all time, period, ever, in any genre. The Illustrated Man also includes one of my favorite short stories of all time in any genre, period, ever, which is Kaleidoscope, which is the story of after a rocket ship is impacted by an asteroid and explodes, we hear the last communications of the 4 or 5 astronauts who were on board as they drift out into the blackness of space and slowly disconnect from each other because they're too far for the radios to communicate. That, like, fucks me up in a horror way on, like, a deeply visceral and existential level. The idea of just, like, drifting consciously into the nothingness of space for forever. Guys, it's so good. It's so written. I love Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury does that nostalgia mixed up with that creepy futurism thing that I love so well and was so formative to me as a young reader that it's influenced a lot of the things I've come to love as an adult reader. I'm not saying everything that's in this is necessarily going to hold up. It's been a while since I've reread like all of the Martian Chronicles, but I really love Ray Bradbury, and given the time that Ray Bradbury was writing in American history, I think you can see a lot of parallels between some of the themes that he was pulling at. Similarly, or in a way that kind of went on to like influence some of the things that I read since then. One of my absolutely favorite authors is like I find that when it comes to short fiction on the SFF, I tend to go slightly more towards the F, like towards the fantasy end. And even then it's usually more like magical realism or the fantastical. It's not like straight fantasy. So one of my favorite authors for that is Kelly Link. I absolutely love this book. I'm just going to read you guys the inside flap because it's what sold me on the book. And if it sold me, I have a pretty good feeling it's going to sell you. This book contains 9 short stories and then she gives a list: a phone booth in Las Vegas, aliens, unhelpful wizards, a possibly carnivorous sofa, a handbag with a village inside it, Tennessee fainting goats, dueling librarians, a statue of George Washington, a boy named Onion, pirates, an undead babysitter, a nationally ranked soccer player, shapeshifters, an unexpected campfire guest, and drawings by Sean Tan. And you can see that the beautiful front piece matches the cover, which is also gorgeous. Kelly Link is fantastic. She has several collections out that you can pick up. Like I said, she does that really, really great blend of the fantastical and the everyday into these stories that just kind of suck you in and wrap you up and spit you out at the end, and you're kind of left a little bit reeling, but wanting more and more and more. That's one of my favorite short fiction feelings. I highly recommend picking up this or any collection by Kelly that you can get your hands on. Similarly, I have gone back to this collection over and over and over again. It's Diving Bells by Lucy Wood. There is something kind of deeply sad but comforting about a lot of these stories. There is the story of a town whose men are drawn to the sea by mermaids and their wives can pay to get them back. There is a town where people are drawn to go to the cliffside where they turn into stone and stay that way for an unspecified amount of time, while their neighbors kind of pick up and carry on with their lives until they unturn to stone. That's just an idea of the kinds of things that are in this book. Again, this is a really lovely blend of mythology and the fantastical and magical realism and all of these things that work together to create this kind of otherworldly and almost surreal experience that while you're reading, that feels at once very far removed and also like deeply relatable and close to home and almost domestic in kind of the closeness of sphere in which Lucy creates. And I just really, really recommend this collection. And then this last one that I'm going to talk about is the one that's arranged thematically, and that is the Starlit Wood New Fairy Tales edited by Dominic Parisian and Nava Wolf. They have those two, Dominic and Nava, have another collection that they edited coming out soon that I'm really hoping is as beautiful in like physical copy as this one is, because I'm very excited to buy it. Like, you can't really see it, but it's like almost embossedly textured, and the artwork on the front is just like absolutely gorgeous. This is one of the very few physical books that I've bought recently, and this is, like it says, a collection of new fairy tales. It is a spin on known fairy tales by some of your like more modern classic fantasy authors, including Shauna McGuire, Jeffrey Ford, Naomi Novik, Marjorie Liu, Garth Nix, and Catherine M. Valente, all of whom I love their short fiction by. When I first read this, I didn't know a lot of the source material, so I actually went back through, looked up a lot of the original stories that things are based on, and then did a reread, doing them companion style. So I would read the original fairy tale and then go and read this one. I'm not saying you have to do that, but when I did it that way, I got so much more out of the stories and was able to read them on so much more of like a deeper, enjoyable level. So if you are unfamiliar with whatever the source material is, I really recommend that you go and look up a version of the myth or fairy tale if you can find it. Otherwise, I really, really like collections that are based like this. I feel like sometimes you want a collection that is all by one author because you know what you're getting. And sometimes you don't really know what you want, but you know you want a feeling. This kind of thing is the closest I've come to ever doing like a IRL AO3 almost like tagging system where I will like find a collection that's arranged by theme or genre or fill in the blank thing here by X number of authors, and then I will read those stories to pick out various things that I liked. That's what I did with All Out, which is a collection of queer teens throughout the ages and short stories. I picked out very select authors from that I really enjoyed. So that's something that you might try if you're looking for new authors or if you're kind of like in a slump or you're not really sure who to pick up next. But I really, really love collections like this for that purpose. And I really love this one because like I love fairy tales and fairy tale reimaginings, and everybody in this collection just like absolutely fucking knocks my socks off. So again, that's the Starlit Wood New Fairy Tales, and I really, really think that everyone should pick it up. And that's it, guys. That's not all my favorite short fiction. I could like talk about this for way longer, but this video feels like long enough. Let me know down below where you get your short fiction from, if you have other collections that have really stood out to you. I love kind of amassing short story collections that I can dip in and out of when the time comes. So please give me recs down below. Otherwise, come find me all over the internet. Come listen to the podcast and hit us up on Patreon if you have a couple dollars to spare. Otherwise, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and have happy reading. Bye.